Horse slaughter, part 2. I'm going to devote this entire video to specifically slaughter methods and, whether or not they can be humane or not. So first I'm going to start with chemical euthanasia, talk a little bit about the difference between euthanasia and slaughter, if there is a difference. Then the puntilla stabbing method, the gunshot method, and penetrating captive bolt pistols. First, chemical euthanasia, and basically euthanasia in general. Euthanasia is defined as the act of humanely putting an animal to death. Now, you can't really understand that if you don't know what humane means, so humane is defined as having or showing compassion or benevolence. So I found that was a very vague definition. Whoops, skipped ahead there. This is a very vague definition, and so euthanasia in itself is a little vague as well. The act of putting an animal to death while having or showing compassion or benevolence. That's varies greatly on opinion. Okay, so animals slaughtered for food cannot be put to sleep, quote unquote, like pets, because the chemicals injected into them could be harmful to the people eating the meat. That's a big one. I personally am not a vegetarian. I don't want to eat beef that has chemicals in it that killed an animal. I'm not comfortable with that, and I don't think intellectually that would be very smart either. So chemical euthanasia is simply not an option. So is there another humane way to do this? Is there another way that I can have my beef and not be cruel and inhumane at the same time? When the definition of humane is so vague, it really varies person to person. Slaughter is defined as the killing of animals for food. Again, it's very simple, and depending on your opinion, there may or may not be reason for slaughter. There may or may not be reason slaughter can not also be humane euthanasia. They might be different, they might not be, but it's your opinion, it's up to you, and what you think is right. There is no universal consensus on that. So now the actual slaughter methods. So each different method has its own ups, its own downs, and some might be more humane than others. You might think that some are humane, some are not. You might think that they're all humane, you might think that they're all not humane. It really just varies, but I'm going to give you the information that I have, starting with the puntilla stabbing method. This is popular in Mexico, and the puntilla, I've been saying it a lot, puntilla is the knife that is used in this method. It is, that might actually just be the Spanish word for knife. I didn't actually look that up, but this is what they're called. And the horse is stabbed on the top of its head, right where the spine meets the skull, I assume, and this severs the spinal cord, so the brain is technically still alive. I mean, I think in the end they would die anyways, but it's a bit gruesome. It's considered the least humane method. The animal is paralyzed and they die by the bleeding out process. Again, this is commonly determined to be an inhumane method. It's only allowed in Mexico. I don't know of any other place in the world that ever uses this method. There we go. This is an interesting fact that I learned through my research I wanted to share with you guys. Horses killed with this method have a slightly different flavor than any other method. That's really weird. And they figured out that the reason is because adrenaline is released due to the stress of the slaughtering process, and the adrenaline is the chemical that gives the meat that weird little other flavor. And some people like that flavor, but too bad. Only the puntilla stabbing method produces this taste, which is caused by stress. So that's a reason not to like this method. It's a very tangible reason, actually, but it's also supportive of the idea that the other methods are humane. And speaking of other methods, next is gunshot, and it's just simple regular guns that are kind of controversial in themselves, but guns are the popular tool of choice in Canada, and as with any official gun use, this is public safety, public health, this is a very official use. The worker should be trained in safe, correct handling of the gun. I think that's a given, but some people seem to forget that when you're determining whether something is humane, you should determine it by the proper use. I mean, if you do something improperly, then you're going to be wrong no matter what. And also, in order to be used correctly, the animal needs to be shot from the specified angle and distance that most efficiently and humanely puts them to death, essentially. So, again, the controversy should be over whether or not gunshot and other methods are capable of being humane at all, and what policies should be in place and enforced to assure that slaughter is humane. This is my opinion. I made that up. You can take it or leave it, agree or not. Just something to consider. And lastly, we have penetrating captive bolt. This was the method that was used in the United States before horse slaughter became illegal. And actually that law ended in 2011. Horse slaughter is now legal. We still can't eat horses in the US, but we can slaughter them, which is why this is a very important issue, determining whether or not it can be humane and whether or not we want to reinstate the law that made it illegal. So captive bolt guns, which is our old preferred method of choice, they do not introduce contaminants, which is bullets and bullet fragments, into the animal's body and into the meat. That's the entire reason we can't use chemical euthanasia. I'm sure it doesn't... Well, let me not make assumptions. Let's just go on. This is a picture of the penetrating captive bolt pistol. I want to clarify that this is different than the non-penetrating type. You can see the first point there is that there are two different types, and we specifically use penetrating on horses. The penetrating captive bolt is the kind that is shot into the brain, so it actually causes death. This is the cause of death, unlike the puntilla method where the cause of death was bleeding out. No, this is the cause of death. It kills the brain, and so the animal is essentially brain dead. And this is the same condition, being brain dead, that people are in when you harvest their organs for people in need. It's generally accepted under that context. Another perspective to think about. Just to sum up, we discussed the different types of euthanasia, humanity. We talked about whether or not slaughter can even be humane. That's something for you to think about. And then each of the three methods for slaughtering horses in particular. We've got the stabbing method from Mexico, gunshot up in Canada, and penetrating captive bolt. Thanks for watching. Please watch part 3 and part 1 if you haven't already. Go to animalethicsri.weebly.com for more information and like our Facebook page.